Hey guys, Mr. Bowman here. Today's learning objective is in green and we are learning to simplify fractions. And before we move on to simplifying fractions, I just want us to recall a phrase that we learnt in an earlier video, and that phrase was highest common factor. So what we did is we found the common factors of two given numbers and then we looked at the highest one of those. So let's quickly recap that. So let's try 25 and 30. So let's try to list all the factors that they have in common. So they can both be divided by 1. 30 can be divided by 2 as well, but 25 can't. 30 can be divided by 3, but 25 can't. Can't be divided by 4 for either of them. Both of them can be divided by 5 though. 30 can be divided by 6, but 25 can't. Neither of them can be divided by 7. Neither of them can be divided by 8 or 9. 30 can be divided by 10 though. It can also be divided by 15 and it can also be divided by 30. And the last one, 25, can be divided by 25. So these are all the common factors. What we needed to do is we need to identify the highest one in both of these lists. In our case, it's 5. And if we put that or use those skills as a fraction, so we got 25 divided by 30, we know that 5 is the highest common factor. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to divide the top by 5 and we're going to divide the bottom by 5. And what that does is that removes the 5 and it makes our fraction simpler. So 25 divided by 5, that comes to 5. And 30 divided by 5, well, that comes to 6. And that there would be the simplest version of our fraction. And what we're now going to do is we're going to change pen color and we're going to get into about, well, basically heaps of examples. So we're going to use the yellow pen for rest of today's lesson. So question 1, 4 divided by 8. How would we simplify that? So I just want to emphasize, you don't necessarily have to have the highest common factor, but as long as you have a common factor, that will help to get to your answer. So I can see that these both have a 2 in common, so I'm going to divide them both by 2. That's going to become 2 over 4. But I can also see, we've got to check again, 2 divided by 4, they also appear to have a factor in common, and they both look like they've got a 2 in common. So I'm going to divide both of those by 2, and that's going to become 1 over 2. And that there would be the simplest answer. So I just want to contrast that with, so let's say we've got our other one over here, so 4 over 8. Let's say we used the highest common factor of 4 instead of 2. So let's divide both of them by 4. That also would have got us to 1 over 2. So it doesn't matter which method you take, as long as you're continually checking, is there a common factor, then you'll be in a good spot. So let's have a go at a few more questions. So let's try 16 over 20. So it doesn't matter about the highest factor. If you just find a common factor, you will be able to help the simplifying process. So I normally work in 2s because it's easy to spot and divide things by 2. So both of those have definitely got factors of 2. So that becomes 8 over 10. Now we've got to think to ourselves, we don't just stop. Does 8 over 10 have a common factor as well? And I think they do. Again, they've both got a 2 in common. So we'll divide both of those by 2, 4 over 5. And then again, do we think to ourselves, do they have a common factor? This time around, I don't think they do. And that's because the numerator 5, or the denominator 5, that's actually a prime number. And the point of a prime number is they don't have factors other than themselves and 5. So that's the simplest version there. Let's have a go at another question. We'll make it a bit more difficult. Let's go 15 divided by 35. So we can't use the divide by 2 trick because they're both odd numbers, so 2 won't be a factor of them. But we need to think what other numbers may be a factor of 15 and 35. And what I think is maybe 5, because 5 times 3 is 15, and 5 times 7 is 35. So let's divide the top and the bottom by 5. So that's going to become 3 over 7. And at this point, we've got to think to ourselves, are there any other common factors in 3 and 7? It doesn't look like there is, so that would be our final answer. Nice. Question 4, let's use some bigger numbers. Let's go 250 divided by 400. So tons of different factors for these types of questions, but what I always start is we can see how they both got a 0 on the end. That is normally an indicator that they both have factors of 10. So let's get rid of that 10 first by dividing by 10, which becomes 25, because we can get rid of that 0, divided by 40, because we can get rid of that 0 too. We then got to look or think, does 25 and 40 have any other common factors? And I think it does again, so I think they're both divisible by 5. So it's going to become 5 over 8. And again, we've got to ask ourselves the same question. Does 5 and 8 have a common factor? It doesn't look like it does, so that means 5 over 8 would be our simplest final answer. Okay, so we'll do 2 more questions, and then I'll leave it to you guys, and we'll be able to do heaps of practice. So let's do a tricky one, 37 divided by 33. So we've got to think of factors. So what factor does 27 and 33 have in common? Well, they're both divisible by 1. That's easy. They're odd numbers, so they're not divisible by 2. By 3, yeah, maybe 3, because 27 divided by 3 is 9, and 33 divided by 3 is 11. So I'm thinking 3, so let's see what happens when we do both by 3. So that becomes 27 divided by 3 is 9, 33 divided by 3 is 11. Okay, so it looks like we're good there. We then got to ask ourselves, 11 over 9, does that have a common factor we can take out? It doesn't look like it does, which means that's our final answer. And our final question we're going to look at, what about 120 divided by 160? So let's use our trick. Both of those have zeros on the end, which means we know that 10 is a factor, so let's divide both by 10. You could have also picked another number, but I'm going to start off with 10. 12 divided by 16. Well, both of those are even numbers, so they're both going to have a 2 in common. Let's do those. That's 6 over 8. And again, still even. We can divide both of those by 2. 3 over 4. 3 over 4, we've got an odd number now. So we've got to think of other numbers, but it doesn't look like there's any other common factors, which means 3 over 4 is our final answer. So hopefully you found today's video on simplifying fractions useful. Just a reminder, please, 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 as you're doing it, make sure you're thinking about what common factors do they have in common. All right, let's pause the video if you haven't already. Make sure you get down the examples, and then let's get into heaps of questions. All right, see you guys.